Good evening, everyone. I'm Tom Kulaga, Executive Creative Director of the New York Times live conversation series, TimesTalks. For 20 years, TimesTalks has paired New York Times journalists with the brightest and boldest creative minds from the arts, media, politics, business, and technology. We are thrilled to present our first ever TimesTalks in Detroit on the most important topic facing the automotive industry today: the battle over the future of driverless cars. I want to give special thanks to Deloitte, the sponsor of tonight's TimesTalks Tech event. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Deloitte's Michigan Managing Partner, Mark Davidoff.
Good evening. Deloitte is so proud to be partnering with New York Times on this important leadership series that's really moving across the country, bringing important topics to important leaders like you in important cities like Detroit. The topic tonight is mobility. That's not only just important to Detroit and Michigan, it is imperative. It is our legacy, it is our destiny. We put the world on wheels. We taught the world how to say, "I love my car." But we can't take for granted our position in the mobility space. And that's why we're so fortunate to have a great leader like Governor Rick Snyder, who put a flag down in mobility to put Michigan in the first position. With infrastructure like M-City and the American Center for Mobility, as well as a programmatic initiative with the Michigan Council on Future Mobility to ensure that Michigan is always in the pole position. Mayor Duggan in Detroit has also put a flag down in mobility, and together, this ecosystem will make Michigan best positioned for the future. However, we know we can't do it alone. It's going to take collaboration and cooperation around the world with everybody in this system looking at Detroit and Michigan as the epicenter. With that, we're looking forward to a very dynamic conversation tonight, and we thank all of you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. We've assembled a world-class panel to assess the multi-billion-dollar stakes in the race for dominance in mobility. Moderating tonight's discussion is Rebecca Blumenstein, Deputy Managing Editor of the New York Times since February 2017. Rebecca is a graduate of the University of Michigan, where she was Editor-in-Chief for the Michigan Daily. She's a Detroit and Bay City native. Please join me in welcoming Rebecca and our panelists: Kevin Johnson, President and CEO of Detroit Economic Growth Corporation; Raj Kapoor, Chief Strategy Officer at Lyft; Sharif Marakbi, President and CEO of Ford Autonomous Vehicles; and Michigan Governor Rick Snyder.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Mark. And thank you all for being here tonight. I am thrilled to join you all in this just beautiful gem theater tonight. I am also thrilled to be hosting the first New York Times event here in Detroit, which is something I've long wanted to do. And we are just so lucky to have this very prominent and influential panel here to help us answer some vital questions facing the auto industry. It was last year in April 2017 when the market value of Tesla briefly surpassed that of Ford and then General Motors. I have to say, around Detroit, and I know a lot of households in Michigan, there was a lot of nervousness about that. Things have now come back to earth. Tesla's having its share of problems, but giant questions remain about whether Detroit can hold its own versus Silicon Valley. So to get us started, we have Raj here from Silicon Valley. We have a venture capital perspective. We have Lyft. We have the auto industry. But Governor, why don't you get us started? You've made mobility a big part of your priority since you took office. How is Michigan faring versus Silicon Valley?
Well, I think we're doing great. First of all, thanks for coming here. It's great to have you in Detroit. But one of the things I tell people is mobility, in many sense, is the convergence of the IT industry and the auto industry. So when you hear the Silicon Valley versus Detroit thing, I really view it as a marketing statement in some ways. It's not a competition the way I view it. Actually, I think it's great for Detroit because quite often, who would have thought that you'd be comparing these two places? And Kevin can speak to this. Detroit is the comeback city in our country. It's really how do we take the skill sets from information technology, which the Valley is the world's leader in, and how do you combine it with the auto industry, which we're the world's leader in? The third part I would add, though, is hopefully we're both not arrogant enough to realize that the changes are coming from all around the world, though. That I view it as, in Michigan, what we're doing is creating the Planet M ecosystem, which I think is the best in the country, in the world. But we're also reaching out to partner with everyone. We want to be the best partner in the world. Because that's how you do something like this, because this will affect society worldwide in a positive way. And let's win together. So it's not a win-lose in my view, it's a win-win.
So Raj, you come from the Valley, and we were talking backstage. The reason you joined Lyft is that you're a deep believer in the threat of global warming, and you, quite frankly, want there to be fewer cars on this earth. Those are fighting words in this city.
Well, I think there was a distinction that was made early on, which is that, yes, our mission is about improving people's lives with the best transportation, and what we realize is that there are, over the next 10 years, 2.5 billion people moving into cities, and there's no way that just adding more cars and adding more roads is going to solve the problem. But reducing car ownership does not mean reducing mobility. Mobility should absolutely increase, and I think Michigan is in a great place to help Silicon Valley in terms of increasing mobility. We do not believe at all that we can do this alone. We are not good in Silicon Valley at manufacturing cars. There may be some exceptions with Tesla or others.
No, it's not.
You're saying they're good at that?
I knew what answer I'd get here. But the point is, we believe deeply in partnerships in doing this. In fact, we're in the process of developing autonomous vehicles ourselves in Silicon Valley. We've gone from 0 to 300 people in 17 months, stood up an exciting new facility in Palo Alto. The first thing that we did was strike a partnership with a company that has most of its workforce here in Michigan, which is Magna. So they've partnered with us so that they can help us develop autonomous vehicles together using their expertise in functional safety, their expertise in manufacturing. So we recognize from day one that we just can't do this alone.
So Kevin, you moved to Detroit just in June from Atlanta, where you had a very prominent position in Invest Atlanta. What have you found here in Michigan in terms of driverless, and what's happening here in Detroit right now?
Well, I think it's important to note that from an economic development perspective, that Michigan and Detroit specifically, there is no city in the world, and the governor, we just got back from China, so I can say this with a level of authority here, that the world knows that the automotive industry circles around this state. And Detroit specifically has some DNA embedded in its soul that makes that industry function in a way that it can't function anywhere else in the world. And because we need to go out and promote that, that gives us an economic development business some competitive leverage when we talk to anybody from the supply chain to OEMs, that we have this spirit about us. We know how to make stuff. We've been making stuff here for a long time. What we're trying to do now is make the right vehicles. So it may not be more vehicles, but the vehicles that you make need to be the right vehicles. And I think that this whole autonomous vehicle conversation is leading us in that direction.
So Sharif, you have worked at Ford for many years. You took a bit of a hiatus and went to go work for Uber, and then came back last year to be Ford's head of autonomous vehicles. Where are you? Your life seems to kind of embody this sort of Detroit, Silicon Valley question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's actually an interesting debate, because I'm not even sure it needs to be a debate. The success of things like autonomous cars, which is key to mobility in the future, really needs both. And I always find it funny when people talk about Detroit versus Silicon Valley, because one thing is I work 1.4 miles away from here in the Silicon Valley.
In Corktown.
In Corktown. So I feel that...
That's worth a hand clap.
Thank you. I've had the opportunity to work in different environments, and we truly are made a strategic move to create this environment here in Detroit. And what it really needs is, and clearly the Silicon Valley is in the Bay Area, and San Francisco is very powerful in terms of agile software development, creating the software very fast and being able to prove things out, and we need that skill. At the same time, the automotive industry is really, really good at manufacturing things at scale with functional safety and making sure that it works every time. And you really need both to make this work. And I'm proud to say that that's what we're exactly doing here. And we're doing it very close to here. We are partnering with an artificial intelligence company that is in multiple places, like in Pittsburgh and in Dearborn and in the Silicon Valley as well. And we're really bringing those two skills together, and you need both to make it work. So I'm pretty excited to say that that's what we're doing, and we respect both skills.
I want to talk about the role of the city and state here, but let's start off with you. What did Ford announce recently involving the train station, and is this part of the, how will you use Detroit in a sense as a testing ground?
Absolutely. So we made a strategic move to start in Corktown and to grow Corktown workforce, including the train station. So Ford purchased the train station and renovating the train station. It'll be a few years before that's ready, but we already moved to Corktown. So we moved our electric vehicle development and our autonomous vehicle development and the team, the strategy, the business, and even the software teams into Corktown. And that is just the beginning. It's amazing, it's only been a few months and we're already filling the place that we have. The strategic vision is that we would grow. We live in an urban area like Detroit. We need that because we see autonomous vehicle and electric vehicles will thrive in this environment. We're also, our Argo artificial intelligence company is going and doing high definition mapping of the Detroit area to understand all the different aspects of the Detroit streets areas. And we'll continue to grow. So we actually feel, we already started to feel this, that our workforce, our people, including me, that moved here to work here, we're developing a different mindset, a different attitude, that we're in an urban society to make this work, and understanding the streets, walking down at lunch to the restaurants, and is very powerful, because that's where autonomous vehicles are going to be.
Raj and Kevin, you're thinking about the role of cities. Should cities be planning for different, fewer cars?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's often not talked about is that the future is not complete if it's just autonomous. There are actually three things that are really important in the future. It's about autonomous, it's about electric, and it's about shared. Mm-hmm. And I think Detroit is making, and Michigan is making a huge difference also in electric as well. Those are important because in order to reduce car ownership, you need to have those that are there. In order to make sure that we meet our climate objectives, you need to have electric that's there as well. We've been working really hard on shared. We were the first company to really come out there with it. I'm excited to say now that 35% of all Lyft rides are shared, two people that don't know each other. I remember a couple years ago, people were saying, are you going to get in the car with someone you don't know? Mm-hmm. And now what people realize is that, yeah, actually it's more fun to talk to someone than it is to look at your phone all day. Mm-hmm. And so we're seeing a whole, yes, it is cheaper, but it's also bringing back community and connection, which I think is really important. And that's going to be a key in order to enable that we will have less congestion, that we'll have less emissions, and that people can move around their city.
Will ride sharing be the first implementation of autonomous driving?
Yeah, and so, a belief there is that one of the things also to think about for autonomous is that this is not a technology that's just going to work everywhere, anytime. It works in specific areas with specific conditions in terms of weather, what is out there. And so ride sharing is in a unique position that when you order a Lyft, you're specifying that you're going from the Gem Theater to somewhere else in downtown Detroit. We can look at that instantaneously with our partners like Ford and say, all right, that ride is safe. We can handle that ride with an autonomous vehicle, get you a vehicle out there in 3 minutes. 3 minutes is the magic time. If it's not, we can get a human driver there to take you. I think we are at least a decade, if not longer, where you're going to have this hybrid network, just like your phones have 3G and 4G. Same thing.
Yeah, I'd just reinforce that. I mean, if you look at an autonomous vehicle, at first application is going to be just more expensive, the technology involved. So it's great for a rideshare application. You need to be thoughtful about that. As a practical matter, though, people skip over what are the benefits. Why are we actually care about all this? Yeah. The environment's one of it, but it's really safety. Yeah. I mean, over 90-some% of accidents are human error. It's opportunity. We have seniors. We have people that don't have access to transportation. It's opportunity to change their lives. And that's the infrastructure question. We simply wouldn't have the infrastructure. We wouldn't want to build it. To support a traditional vehicle model. As you say, the cities are going to grow. How do we use our infrastructure talking to these vehicles? So they won't all be autonomous, they can be connected. And we have to understand there are some societal downsides to all this in terms of looking at the challenges and issues. You have to worry about class divides in terms of who has access and who doesn't. There are a lot of jobs that could eventually disappear in some of these categories with ride sharing. So as we look to all the cool things, I get so excited. I'm a proud nerd. I get fired up about all the cool things. But I also believe we need to be equally responsible about talking about the negative societal challenges and implications, and we do that in a thoughtful fashion. And that's what the companies are largely trying to do, be part of that dialogue.
I think it's important, too, to note that as this industry expands, one of the things that concerns me when I was in Atlanta, and what I think all cities need to embrace is investing in the infrastructure to support the development of these vehicles. And I think that cities are slow adopters sometimes, or they do it in small segments. So like, let me just see how it works on Main Street between 3rd and 4th Street, you know, instead of kind of rolling it out wide, you know, go big in this thing. And I think that if we don't get there quickly, then we'll have all of this technology and no place to put it, no place to test it. And I think that the sufferer of that lack of infrastructure investment in technologies, whether we're going to 5G, you know, I heard when we were in China, someone said there are 2 mobile devices that everybody has access to, you know, 2 mobile devices.
Your phone.
One is this, and the other is your car, right? That's it. Those are the 2 mobile devices that we can all wrap our heads around. And without the infrastructure to connect us, then it's just like, you know, Star Trek.
Where is that going to come from in this environment?
I was going to say one of the things, there's definitely the infrastructure piece, but I think the point about working in a city and figuring out whether it's areas that people don't have access to mobility where autonomous cars can go out and you know, move people, or local businesses. It's another thing that we're spending a lot of time on, is to figure out some of the local businesses have no means of delivery. So this is not people, but it's goods, things that they need to deliver. So we're testing a lot of these with current vehicles in Miami and in other places to really figure out what can we help with, whereas there's also good business. So we're working
kind of filling the gaps of government.
Yeah, exactly. And we think that part of it is because the expense and everything else, autonomous vehicles are going to be expensive and they need to be in a shared environment. We believe that ride hailing is going to be a very, very important piece of it in the beginning, especially with the expense. But we're also supplementing that with working with the local businesses to see what we could do to fill that and to provide them transportation and delivery that hopefully can help them grow their business.
One thing I want to mention is, I think we brought up here transportation inequity. It's a really, really big issue. One of the things that we've been spending a lot of time on recently is looking just at what's going to happen in November around voting. And we looked in 2016 and saw that 15 million people were registered to vote but didn't vote because of transportation issues. This is a nonpartisan issue. Doesn't matter who they are, they just didn't get out to the polls. So one of the things we did for this coming election is that we're going to give free rides to underserved communities and 50% off to anyone. And we're going to actually put it into their Lyft app where the poll is, press the button, just go. So those are examples where you don't even necessarily connect them, but they're so connected. And the examples also go on to healthcare as well, non-emergency medical transport. How many people miss their doctor's appointments? I think it's about 3.6 million people a year are missing doctor appointments because they didn't have inadequate transportation. And unfortunately, it's really hurting the underserved communities that are there.
And this is what we're trying to engage, though. So to build on that, it's really great. I was proud when we did our last year's budget. We set aside $8 million that we're starting to do grants now for Mobility Challenge. Where literally we're going out to any groups of organizations that want to come bid on how to actually use mobility in the broadest sense to help people, and particularly we focused in on seniors who again may not have access to transportation, veterans, other people in need, because part of this is showing the rest of society the positive values of this, and then to do a lot of pilots. There is not one answer here. It's going to happen many different ways, and the more we can learn by having real-world experience, that will give us a better grounding as to what direction to head as we grow through this process.
So let's talk about safety. There was a fatal accident with the Uber vehicle in Arizona last spring. And there does seem to be some spoken or unspoken tension over this issue. Obviously, you know, there's been one fatality with an autonomous vehicle, and some people will say there's obviously many more with traditional vehicles. But you know, Governor, you passed a number of laws that that basically allow for testing right now on roads in Michigan. Are you worried about something like that happening? And what steps are you taking, others on the panel, to make sure that doesn't happen again?
Well, anytime you lose a life, it's a tragedy. So anytime something like that happens, it's bad. But the question is as you said, there's lots of vehicles out there and we do lose lives. But how do we learn from that? The whole goal is how do we be safer by all this work? And that's why it's important we have standards that the industry is living up to. And as long as the industry is working hard and they're showing they're doing the right thing, again, I think we should give them a fair amount of flexibility in doing this, because it is being responsible about it. We have to get out there and test, but part of this is it's not just about testing on roads. People forget, if you want to do the development right, and there's experts on this panel more than I am can speak to this, it's really how do you take closed loop track testing, closed environment testing. That's why we created M-City and ACM, to be the world's leader in having those facilities. Ford was a founding member of that. It's also how do you do computer simulation, and then how do you do real world. So it's really how you take the combination of all those things, because with computer simulations, you can do millions of simulations to say this would happen, and hopefully you incorporate that learning in your model.
That's absolutely right. So the power, one is the developer, we have to be very responsible in what we do and what we simulate and what we put on the road, and taking the steps from simulation to software prove out on closed environments like M-City and ACM, and then be comfortable with it to be able to put it on the road, and even on the road with a safety driver and engineer to make sure everything's okay, and documenting things so that we can put it back in simulation and doing that. I think that's the way to prove out the work, because you gotta work in the real world to do this, because some of the tools are not really proven yet. And then at the same time, developing the system for safety. So we published recently the safety report from Ford, and it's the fundamental overarching thing over autonomy development. Everything we do is around safety, and we know the purpose of it is safety. We know we have to put safety in it, thinking about things like developing redundant systems in the car, which never existed before. Things like if the steering, braking, acceleration, if it fails, there's a redundant system to take care of that for safety. So those are things we're all developing, testing. On the software side, like you mentioned, it's really just being very, very careful and responsible in what you do, and then you put it on the road as a last thing after you prove the simulation, the closed loop, everything.
And can you explain just to the uninitiated M-City and what are these
you
programs?
want to talk about that all day long.
Yeah, well, in Michigan, we started with M-City, which was one of the earliest and best facilities for closed loop testing. It's on the University of Michigan campus. It's 30-some acres. It's fabulous. And I got yelled at because I oversold it. So we had so many people sign up, the demand was so great, we said, we need to do more. So we said, well, let's go big. So we created the American Center for Mobility. And for the Michiganders here, it's at the old Willow Run facility, the Arsenal of Democracy. So the history of this place is incredible. It's 500 acres. It's a wide-scale environment to test, where we took roads and put them back into private use with founding partners, including great people like Ford, to say how we can use it. So they actually complement one another. You can do more advanced stuff at M-City, if you want to do more practical testing or getting near that point of putting it on the road, ACM's there to do all these other variations. We even have tunnels. We tried to make this place the toughest place you could to go through these conditions to say it's good before you put it out on the road.
And the nice thing is it's all controlled, so you're simulating things. You're actually driving as if you're in the real world, but you're not going through the downtown area. So we use it all the time. We use both of them.
Raj, when are you? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm just saying we're very. This is a very competitive, and I think that we need to understand that this is a very competitive space that we're in, right? Somebody has to be the center of excellence. That has to be determined. And I think we've determined that, Governor. We've determined that this state is the center of excellence for those things. And so because I'm a job-generating machine that I want to be, I'm trying to take like I said, I'm all about competitive advantage, not comparative analysis. I care less what's going on in other parts of the world. I want to go out and talk about what we do here in the city of Detroit, what we do in the state of Michigan, because at the end of the day, somebody's going to want us to help them do something that they can't do any other place in the world. So when you have these types of assets, that's what we go to the market with, and that's what generates opportunities for Detroiters and for Michiganders.
Yeah, just to build on Kevin's comment, is a great illustration is how we can be the best coordinator and bring all these resources together. So we've been signing collaborative agreements with other parts of the world. I mentioned that to you, Rebecca, that the state of Michigan has gone out and now done collaborative agreements with the countries of the Netherlands, the country of the UK, the country of China, and now the country of Australia. And think about that countries are now saying, who do you want as your partner? They're saying the state of Michigan. That sends a pretty powerful message that we're being recognized and we're going to be that coordinating place. Because the way I view it is the more data we get from every place in the world, going back to doing these simulations and everything else, that's how you save a life. That's how you make it safer. That's how you make it better. Because like the UK, there's a difference what side of the road you're running on, and it may not make sense that you need to worry about it, but you're going to get a whole different set of data that could help save a life here.
Raj, not to put you on the spot, but what's a view of this from Silicon Valley? We're all a bit partisan here, sitting in Detroit. Everything sounds great, but if Apple announces a car tomorrow,
they better build it in Michigan. We've already seen how certain cars perform when they're not built in Michigan. Just saying.
We'll go there, but do you? I mean, you're someone, you grew up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. You can relate to an industrial area trying to preserve its place for the future. But all the automakers are really pouring into Silicon Valley as well. So it isn't necessarily assured.
Before I go there, I do want to comment on safety for a second, which is that what came out of that experience that happened was, I think more than anything else, is that this is going to be a shared responsibility. It's not just an issue for a particular company in Arizona or a particular state, whether it's Michigan or others. What we noticed is that when that accident occurred, the trust in self-driving by the public went down 10 points overall. And it wasn't associated with just that brand. It was associated overall. Half of the people that lost their trust never heard about self-driving before they heard about that accident before. So that is a shared responsibility that if any participant in this industry has an issue like that, it reflects upon all of us and will impact Michigan. It'll impact Detroit. It'll impact Apple. It'll impact Silicon Valley as well. So we actually, I think, have to really take a page out of what the airline industry has done. The airline industry, when they experience an accident, they share and report it with all the airlines and all the manufacturers. And they all learn from that information. I think we are going to start to see that as a necessity that's going to come out of this situation that's here in doing it. So getting back to what you were saying about, people pouring into Silicon Valley, let's look at that for a second. For the most part, they're not pouring into Silicon Valley to create vehicles. They're pouring into Silicon Valley to take advantage of the comparative advantage that Silicon Valley has in decades and decades of people doing massive scale compute at Google or Facebook or NVIDIA or all these other places to help solve some of the specific challenges that are there in autonomous driving. That will continue. Silicon Valley has that. But I think that Silicon Valley hasn't proven yet that it can manufacture at scale vehicles that are so intrinsically tied to functional safety and they need to operate all over the world. That's where the partnership opportunity is there in doing it. And you even see Apple is also figuring this out on what is it that Apple's comparative advantages in autos in certain areas. So I think it really does come back to what we talked about before, which is that it's the best of that's going to make mobility successful.
Kevin, you almost went there. We talked about Tesla at the outset.
I didn't say anything about Tesla. No.
There's been some, well, I will. There's been a lot of coverage lately of some problems at Tesla, both with production and shipping and distribution. A colleague of mine at the Times, Neil Boudet, had a story today about cars being stockpiled in hidden places. Yeah. What do you think this shows? Should people around here start feeling a bit more smug?
No. First of all, and I can say this because I'm new to Michigan, smug is never a good position to be in, all right? You sit on the lead, you usually lose. Mm-hmm. So we're not going to sit on the lead anymore, right? We've done that. We've been there as a state. We're not sitting on the lead. We're going to adapt, adjust, and innovate the way you should when you're on any situation where you are in a place where you can be maintain some leadership. So we're not sitting on the lead anymore. As far as that company is concerned, maybe what they should rethink, and I think they have to kind of maybe think about re-engineering their whole thought process around the supply chain and what people do best. The first thing I said when you asked me, I said, in Michigan, we build things and we make things better than any other place in the world. We taught you how to do it. We taught the world how to do it. The DNA of that still exists in this state. One of the things that we have to do, and I know the governor is all into this, is as much as Silicon Valley is what it is, you got 15,000 engineering students that's pumping out of here or more that's focused on creating and being the Silicon Valley model. Model it, match the software with the application. The applied part of what we do is why we have this partnership that's developing, and that's a good thing. Survival cities match with cities that have things that they can share. Shared regions make sense. So I think what that company needs to do is re-engineer how they think about how they deliver their products. And if they think about it, we'd love to talk to them.
Governor?
Yeah, just to build on Raj's comment about the drop in consumer confidence, because I have said this to many people in the auto industry. I said, the analogy you need to look at, it sounds goofy, is milk. Because I said, if there's a group of people that don't love government regulation, it's farmers. And I love the farmers, just like the auto people. But if you look at a dairy farmer, they're the first people to say they want good, solid regulation because their greatest fear in life is one bad gallon of milk in terms of what it would do to consumer demand. So these are the kind of learnings that the industry needs to set a high standard themselves, to set that bar very high, so it doesn't create that drop in confidence. So that's important. Beyond that, though, when you talk about the Valley and some of these kind of issues versus Michigan, I think it's pretty clear. We make things, just as Kevin said. #1 in manufacturing jobs over the last 8 years, top 3 in tech jobs. And then there is this whole psychology, and I don't mean this in a negative way, because these are quality companies that we're talking here. But I was in the IT business. I was in a PC company for many years. In that business, in the software business, if you had an issue, if you had a bug, you'd ship it, and then you'd ship another version later, and you'd ship another version later. You can't do that same psychology when you're talking about safety involving major vehicles that can do a lot of damage. So that is a big transition. The other thing is the cost of being out there and the innovation going on here. When you got the Bay Area at $117,000 a year as low income, that's pretty tough to say you're going to go find 500 or 1,000 people to work for you to do a lot of work. You can have brilliant researchers and people, but when you actually want to scale up, we're telling them come to Michigan, and we're seeing them come here. And I'll give you the great illustration. Washtenaw Community College on their own, the community college in Washtenaw County, came up with, I believe, the world's first mobility technician program. We've got great engineers. You're a Wolverine, you know that. We got great engineers, but beyond that, mobility technicians are the people that are going to repair LiDAR, radar, and vision systems. They're going to be needed in every car repair place in this country eventually. But right now, the industry needs everyone they get because you can have engineers, but you need those technical people out there doing that work day in and day out to make sure we keep running. That's what we do really well here is we have the engineer with the technician working side by side.
I'm going to open it up for questions in a few minutes. I still have plenty, but I have to ask all of you, you know, the auto industry is known for booms and busts, and we have been enjoying a relative boom for many years, as has the overall economy. What happens to this optimistic picture if things go south? You know, this is, you know, Ford, General Motors, many are investing billions and billions of dollars.
I think the key is when we see electric vehicles or autonomous vehicles, a concentrated effort to continue investment and development of those. That's the future of transportation, even in tough times. So we know that it'll be, you know, it's a very difficult thing to do, but that's the future. And I feel the move that Ford made, for example, of continuing to invest, actually grow the investment in those areas, start that in downtown Detroit in a, you know, separate and growing areas, understanding the urban society where this is going to be deployed everywhere in the country and around the globe. It's that decision making of continuing to do that regardless of what happens, and that's what builds the future.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know one thing that, and you're right. We've seen this, you know, we've seen this act before. One thing we don't need is help, and what I mean by that is the disruption in the supply chain won't help, doesn't help us. And you know, trade policies are important. This is the supply chain is global, and when you see things that kind of disrupt that, we don't need that help.
You don't need tariffs.
I'm not saying anything about anything. I'm just saying we don't need help to get us to a point where we're at a pressure point in our industry when it means so much to so many, and it has this kind of cascading effect. Because if Detroit gets a cold, the country gets the flu. Trust me. So that's all I'm saying about that. And I'll let the marketplace take care of everything else.
Raj, we were talking backstage, friend or foe. You know, journalists like to see one versus the other typically, but you have partnerships with almost everyone. How does that work? Like, how can you be partners with everybody at the same time?
There are areas where two parties can benefit each other, and then you have to recognize that in some cases they're also going to potentially compete. So it's finding the strengths and bringing them together and being open to the fact that we're in a period of significant change. You asked about the auto industry, boom or bust in doing it. What is clear to me, and I don't know what exactly the year is, but there is going to be a significant inflection point. The nature of car ownership is changing. Young people are more about access than they're about ownership. Their identity is not as much into a car as it used to be. One example is just a week ago, we started this crazy campaign. And maybe Detroit doesn't like this campaign, but we did it in Detroit too, and it was called Ditch Your Car. And what we did is we offered a bundle of shared ride credits, a bundle of bike sharing credits, transit as well. And in Detroit, the bike sharing was Mogo, so we partnered with them as well in doing it and offered this and said, try for a month not to be using your car and to utilize all this transportation as a service that's in front of you. We expected, you know, we launched this in 35 cities. We expected a couple thousand people to sign up. As of yesterday, we had 150,000 people that signed up. Blew our mind. So we think that this is the beginning that's there. People are expressing this and saying that, look, there's a different way that we can do things. There's a different way that we can move around the city. That doesn't mean that mobility providers, that Detroit, Michigan can't do it. It's just that there's going to be a significant change. The business model is about usage. And how can Detroit and how can Michigan make a great business out of usage versus just selling an item that's there? You saw this with Netflix. You saw this with Spotify. It's coming to transportation. But I think this is the time for Detroit and Michigan to be agile.
So using cars more continuously than having them sit in the driveway for...
The consumer uses a car 4% of the time. We're utilizing a car 70 to 80%. There's no doubt we can save for the consumer. We can save on resources. And there's no doubt there's enough money there that everyone in the supply chain can benefit. We just have to rethink what mobility is.
Doesn't that make you nervous?
I'll comment on that. Actually, Raj is right in terms of the trend. That just means that if you think about it from the automotive industry, we have to think about things differently. There's the service and the shared piece, but also if you're utilizing a car 70, 80% of the time, you got to design that car differently because that car needs to run hundreds of thousands of miles over a very short period of time. So the auto industry has designed cars for over 100 years for that specific use of 4 to 5% of the time, over so many years, 150,000 miles, and all the other metrics. That just means we've got to be agile. Part of being agile is actually thinking about with that trend happening, what do you need to do? And maybe cars will be consumed faster, and you'll have more cars that way or not. And but it really doesn't matter. It's the moving with the trend, what's happening, and what you need to do in vehicles. And I agree, the shared mobility is the future. I mean, it doesn't make sense to have a big, expensive thing that sits 95% of the time.
Governor, one last question before I open it up to questions. You visited China, perhaps more than any other country, and are very proud of the Chinese investment here in Michigan. The Chinese are perhaps the biggest competitor, forget Silicon Valley. What's your sense of both their role in the future in Michigan and where they're going to fit into all of this?
Yeah, and they're making huge investments. Even more than autonomous connected would be the electric side. Mm-hmm. If you look at battery development, all these kind of things, and they're mandating the use of these. So they're going to have many more electric vehicles out there by millions than we will in the US. So again, you're not going to push technology back anywhere in the world. It's going to happen someplace in the world, and you have to figure out how to stay in front on all this. So the way I view it is that's why it's important we really understand what they're doing and that we be thoughtful about keeping our leadership. And so if you look at the auto industry today, I talked to the auto people, there's been no more change, no period of change in the auto industry more since it was founded than right now. If you look at autonomous and connected, if you look at power systems, electric, whether it be battery or hydrogen, and you look at advanced materials, there are huge major trends going on. And so you can say, well, we should feel threatened. We got to defend what we have, or you can say there's opportunity here and we can take us to a whole new quantum leap up over what we've been in the past because we sort of plateaued and had our down period. The way I view it is let's go for it. Let's prove that we're the innovators. We are. What Detroit did in the first part and much of the last century was far greater to the world society than Silicon Valley. People forget that. We forgot that here in Michigan. We're getting our act together again, and we just need to do it again. So let's wake up and let's go.
Questions? You can line up at the microphone there if there are any takers. And if you could introduce yourself quickly.
Sure. My name is Will Simon. I represent a coalition of Israeli mobility companies here in Detroit. And Raj will preface, I had the privilege of working with the DC team at Lyft for a while in the early days, and also the governor of ITS America in DC, which I know you're very involved with. It's obvious there's amazing stuff going on here. I mean, Detroit is spearheading this entire revolution. I'm from Youngstown, Ohio, about 6 hours away from here. I am an Ohio State grad, Rebecca, so we can speak kind. We've been going through, for the last 40 years since the steel mill's closed, some hard times. There was a GM plant there that once employed 15,000 people and now employs less than 1,000. How can what's happening here in the automotive industry, and Youngstown is very similar to the people, the kind of the blue collar, very hardworking attitude. How can the economic development here, how can it help the cities and the towns in the region. How can that spill over? How can we, whether it's in mobility or transportation or bringing more jobs back there, how can we help the region? Because when I watched the Amazon video today. Like when Detroit moves, the world moves, and especially in this region. I mean, it's moving faster. So coming from a place like Youngstown, we've seen better days, how can we use this to kind of help those kind of places?
Anyone want to take that?
Well, if you first of all, I don't necessarily know how to exactly fix Youngstown, Ohio, but what I can tell you is that in places like Detroit, in this Detroit region, in order for this to be sustainable, we have to stitch together a regional partnership that leverages the strengths of the urban core where we sit and allow for the exchange to happen between regions and counties around the core in order to take full advantage of the advancements that are occurring all around us. But if we shut ourselves off from everyone else, then I think we're setting ourselves up for one of those next big drops because we're not connected to one another. I don't think we can ever go back to that model again. And that not only happens here in Detroit, it happened in Atlanta, Georgia, it happened in Charlotte, North Carolina, places where I work, Phoenix, Arizona, where the urban core, was separated from some of the areas around the core, and that disconnection created regional envy, intra-regional envy, and that does us no good, and we certainly can't afford that here in Detroit. So I think that may happen.
Governor, can you talk about your experience here in Michigan and similar
challenges?
I mean,
I'll give you a couple things to think about in terms of looking at it. It was great when I became governor. We were in the hole farther than any other state in the nation. We were at the bottom. We were 50 out of 50. Now we're top 10 again. But part of it, if you look at some of the trends, how many states walked away from manufacturing in this country? They said, we don't want to do it, let's move away. The way I viewed it is, okay, it hit bottom, now it's finally going to be efficient, let's double down and go for it. So we've led the nation in the creation of manufacturing jobs. So you have to learn what you're really good at, your core competencies, and build on them. And the other big thing I would really tell you is the most important thing you can do is talent. And that's getting people the skill sets they need to be connected to the high demand, high paid jobs of the future. That's what I just did with our legislature with the Marshall Plan for Talent in the state of Michigan. It's a 5-year plan. Because if I go to any set of employers, whether it's Lyft, whether it's Ford, it's anyone sitting out in this audience, they'll tell me their greatest concern and greatest problem is getting more people that are highly skilled for the business they have. The jurisdictions, the places that do the best job of fulfilling that need are going to have a competitive economic advantage. One, it will help the companies already in your area grow faster and better, but you're going to be that attractive spot that people will go to. And that's what we've already started seeing in Detroit and Michigan, but we're going to stay in the lead on this. I've made a priority not just of engineering talent, again, technicians, career tech education, the skilled trades, software programming, robotics technicians. There's several categories of jobs out there that we couldn't fill in our country if we don't dramatically change who we are, and let's get our act together and go fill those jobs.
Another question, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Arnav. I work as an algorithm engineer with Aptiv in Michigan. So my question to you is like, to Rick, so when you fly on a plane, so that's autonomous. You don't see it, but that's autonomous. So what are your initiatives to make people believe in the technology and trust it more? So, they accept it well, and, you can have people using ride-sharing services and stuff like that. So what's your take on that?
Actually, Sharif, would you mind mentioning what you just announced today at Ford?
Sure. I think we're using the word trust to help us build what we need to do to address what you're talking about. It's a very hard thing to do. You're right. And how do we get people to trust the autonomous vehicle? And the one thing we just announced today was something that we worked on for the last couple of years and we did some research on, is not only people inside the autonomous vehicle, but people outside the autonomous vehicle, pedestrians, cyclists. There's nobody in the driver's seat to wave to them, what their intent is. So we did a lot of research, as an example, around lighting and signaling to build that connection between the autonomous vehicle and the environment and what people are doing on the street. And now we announced today we're actually inviting others to create a standard around that, because there's a standard when humans do this, or when humans even eye contact. There is no standard for an autonomous vehicle signaling. So there's so much work to do around trust inside the car and outside the car to build that where the aviation industry got to, where people just hop on the plane and know everything's going to be okay. The other thing is a lot of the sensing and a lot of the work. Just every time you see an autonomous car, you see all these sensors everywhere on the car running and rotating, and it's to make sure that everywhere around that car is covered and you're seeing 360 and everything. So that building that trust around the human element of people inside the car, outside the car, in addition to the tech itself, is what we're working on to gain that.
Raj.
Yeah, so with your company, we have launched the largest commercial service for autonomous, and it's in Las Vegas. It's with Aptiv. We're really excited and proud about that. The best way that I think we're going to be able to overcome this is to get people to experience it, is to demystify it. We've had now over 10,000 passengers just over this since May do the Las Vegas service. And we rate, just like Lyft drivers you rate your autonomous drive, and it's a 4.94 out of 5 stars rating with the Aptiv technology that's been developed.
How many cars?
We have about almost 30 cars that are operating right now, doing that many rides also. That tells you how much the efficiency that you can do. But when people walk out, and 96% of them after trying it said that they would do it again, it really is something that you have to experience that's there. It's really hard if you try to explain it to someone because they're nervous about it. And I think Sharif and I were talking about this before. People are used to having some level of control. Right. This is why people are nervous in planes, is what Sharif told me, right? That made sense because they don't have control. But in a car, they feel like they have control. Now they don't have control. It's a very scary thing.
Okay, another. Just quickly, but then we're going to go to another one too, because.
Yeah. So Raj, just one question. Like you told about like autonomy, then electric and sharing. So do you think like electric can replace IC engines because it's the well-to-wheel efficiency, the source of electricity is still coal. So what are your views on that?
Well, I think it depends on the location, and I think that's changing dramatically. So I'm betting that the source of electricity is not going to be primarily coal going forward in doing it. And then the quick answer also is that we're finding it's an economic answer to go to electric because the drivetrains last longer as well.
Yeah, just to give you a couple things, though, that a lot of people are using features of the autonomous vehicle that they find real value today, and we need to market that better. Just think about your backup detector that says you're backing into something. Think about the blind spot detector that you already have. Think about adaptive cruise control. It's really, autonomous is combining all these features and enhancing even more. But hopefully a lot of people are seeing benefits from those things already to help build trust in terms of doing these kind of activities. So that's a big starting point right there. And then on your power one, Michigan, we adopted a policy, we're getting rid of coal, we're changing, and we didn't need the federal government to tell us either way.
So I'm told we have a hard stop at 7:30. What I'm going to do is have 3 of you ask your questions and then ask our panelists to just pick and choose as we wrap up here.
Hello, my name is Wendy with a planning design firm McKenna, and I think my question is mostly for Raj, related to how we can increase accessibility when it comes to shared ride services for individuals who are highly vulnerable. You know, we see Detroit's resurgence happening, right? But we know that there are a lot of individuals who are not, qualified to get jobs in downtown Detroit. And most of the jobs that individuals in Detroit qualify for are in cities like Livonia that are a significant distance away, from their homes. And so for shared ride services like Lyft, do you guys have any plans to increase your accessibility or your affordability for shared ride services to be more of a long-term solution for those individuals who need to make first and last mile connections?
Good question. Okay, 2 more questions and then we'll go to our panelists.
My name is Rich Hastings, and I'm born and raised in Detroit, 50 years, and I've worked for Silicon Valley companies for almost 30 years. So the battle in the narrative between the competition hits home with me a lot. So I call on the autos. I'm very familiar with Lyft and some of the companies you had mentioned, Facebook and others, who have really invested heavily and kind of jumped into the deep end of the pool with newer infrastructures to support deep learning and GPUs and all these things that help development be agile in software development. And I don't necessarily have seen that in my own particular callings on the auto. So I guess this is more for Sharif around how the separation has been with the autonomous and how you look to potentially develop a more internal, more modern infrastructure to support those types of developments versus leveraging AWS, which I know your partner Argo does today, right? So just some of those things where, you know, looking to you to see what we would do here in Detroit to be more advanced in our thinking around leveraging newer infrastructures versus legacy.
Okay. And then one last question.
Hey there, my name is Stephen Sherman. I work one floor below Sharif in Corktown on T-Medicine. My question is how you guys see the dealership model evolving, and especially on the opportunity side in this future mobility.
So why don't we go this way? Sharif, how is Ford going to become a tech company?
Yeah, no, it's a really, really good question. And I think it's the stuff we're doing. When I mentioned earlier, we're Silicon Valley, 1.4 miles away. It's actually, and I've worked on both sides. It's using, actually learning from Silicon Valley. We learned how to work when you see, and you can immediately see working in an open environment in a dynamic area around a special problem you're trying to solve with a few people, and you can move in a few days. That work practice, when I say mindset, is very fundamental to change how we think from an industrial world to a more tech world. The other thing, and I mentioned GPUs and other tech, is one of the challenges in the auto industry is legacy, is the fact that the auto industry does have 100 years of doing things, and now you do incremental things. And some of the tech companies start from scratch. And learning from that, exactly, I think we talked about T-Medicine, which is the electric vehicle. We stepped back about a year ago, and we thought, well, how do these companies do it? And they do it because they don't have that legacy. They start from scratch, and you can do OTA, over-the-air update. You can download software remotely while charging and things like that. It isn't technically challenging, but it's economically challenging. So the way we change is we say we have to leapfrog that and look at what we need to do beyond what others are doing. And if it means you got to invest in something from scratch, you got to do it. Otherwise, you're just going to continue to chase yourself.
Kevin, the question about dealerships and how cities will change. Do you think businesses are going to welcome this with open arms, or is there going to be some resistance along the way?
I think businesses will do what it takes in order to adapt to the market conditions that they're in. Mm-hmm. I think entrepreneurs are just kind of built that way, and I think that kind of mentality will carry the industry forward, whether it's from a dealer network, whether you're buying cars online. I think that's just kind of the way you adapt and adjust in order to take advantage of the market that you're working in. And I don't have a fear of that. It's just the way things are adapting and changing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts, Raj? Dealer networks, that's probably the last thing on your mind as you're thinking about the shared experience. But the mobility question was an important one in terms of just how are people going to afford to pay for these expensive trips?
Yeah, and let's get to that. The 10-second on the dealer network is that in order to support a world autonomous electric shared, and also you're seeing from Lyft, for example, the launch of scooters and electric bikes, we need to build physical infrastructure that's in the city, micro hubs and hubs. We're not going to have scooters and bikes thrown all over the sidewalks. They're going to be organized in doing that. And
okay, we'll take your word on that.
Yeah. And what we're going to see, and we bought Motivate, the largest bike sharing company that's all dock-based to do that. And so what we're going to see is there's going to be lots of opportunity there for entrepreneurs to create the new infrastructure that's going to be in a city. It's just different than what we know. To touch on affordability, really big issue. It's a really important issue, and I don't think we've solved it entirely. The good news, in Detroit, 35% of the rides start in a low-income neighborhood, which is really good to see as a start for Lyft. But I think there's a couple things that are going to happen that hopefully will accelerate this. The autonomous does lower costs We think that we can lower costs pretty significantly down. More people that do shared, the more people that use Lyft, the more we can make shared work, because then people are not doing as much of a detour. So that lowers the prices down. We've also incorporated something amazing called walking, where we ask people to walk a couple minutes. And it significantly increases the matching and reduces the price too, because you can fit more people into a share ride.
Mm-hmm. Governor, we're going to give you the last word. You're leaving office in a few months. You're feeling pretty optimistic, more so than when you came in.
Oh, absolutely. That's an easy call compared to when I came in. Our state we're at the bottom, and we should be proud. We're the comeback state. We got the comeback city in our nation going strong. It's really, we got to look towards the future, and we have to learn lessons from the past and not to take things for granted. Kevin said about not being smug. I mean, that's the main thing, is we've got an exciting future, and we have to do it by having innovative companies and innovative people and partnering well with them and figuring out how people win together. Because the original premise was like the Valley versus Detroit. And anytime you interact with someone, if you do something win-lose, it's a transaction. Because people will wise up, and you're not going to have a long-term relationship. The only way to be successful long-term is how do you make a win for everyone involved, where there's mutual benefit. And that's why we sort of need to look at this whole field. This is about something that's going to profoundly change our society. And aren't we all better off figuring out how we can collaborate the best to get the best solution as quickly as possible with the highest quality, the highest safety, and the highest opportunity to help others, and just do it together. And that's the attitude we've been taking in Detroit and Michigan, and we find partners across the globe that want to do that. Let's just get this done, because it's a huge opportunity to make life better.
I'd like you all to join me in thanking our panelists for a fascinating discussion.